Hey everyone, thanks for tuning back into Zero Podcast. Just before we get into today's episode, I want to say a quick thank you for everyone who's been supporting us on Twitter, liking and retweeting all of our content. It helps us grow and it's much appreciated. So on today's episode, we have GrowDigi. He's the project founder and he's an analyst at ProofOfReview. Let's get into it. GrowDigi, welcome to Zero Podcast. So today we're going to be talking everything ProofOfReview. So to start, how was ProofOfReview started? How did it begin?
Thank you. First of all, thanks for having me on. It's a real pleasure to be on the show, give us the opportunity to talk about our projects and what we're doing. So coming to your question in terms of ProofOfReview and how it was started. So I've been a miner for about 5 years, since 2013, coming up to 6 years now. The one thing I noticed over the last couple of years is that although the standard of projects being launched in the cryptocurrency space has kind of improved over the time I've been here, proof of work projects are kind of still one of those things that there isn't a certain standard for these projects. And I think as miners, we kind of tend to put up with not getting as much information from projects that are proof of work. So basically, in my own world, I started analysing these projects and basically giving them a certain rating and criteria, which kind of helped me filter which ones were the ones I'd be a bit more interested in. Mm-hmm. So naturally, that just kind of grew into ProofOfReview, which is basically the idea behind it is just to provide like an objective and factual review on a project. So someone could just pick this up, go through the actual criteria and what's listed and all the information, and then make an informed decision about the project. So yeah, that's pretty much how we came around, I guess. The main ethos of this is just to bring a certain standard of information to projects in the sector, I guess. So, you know, again, the general public, if they're looking to get information about a proof of work coin, instead of clicking on the and then, you know, having to search through 5 or 10 different pieces of information to build a picture around the coin, we hope that ProofOfReview is kind of going to make that whole process a bit easier for people.
Yeah, and you're big on giving exposure to, you know, smaller projects, so to speak, as well.
100%. I mean, again, I think when we looked at the idea of providing a review for the public in the proof of work sector, so to speak, the one thing that we're kind of aware of is a lot of coins in this sector, they tend to be under the radar, so to speak, or smaller projects. And I think that's just natural because anyone who's been around in crypto a while appreciates that, you know, projects that do ICOs and fundraising, they're naturally going to be bigger from launch just due to the fact that they've got a bigger budget to be able to do all their stuff a lot quicker. What you find with proof of work coins, they're kind of like the heartbeat of crypto, you know. These are the coins where, you know, it's kind of free and fair for anyone who's got a GPU, CPU, anyone who's basically got access to a computer to be able to mine. And not only that, I think the beauty of mining is that there's a little technical side to it. So, you know, it's kind of nice that the people who mine these coins early on are sometimes rewarded maybe with a price increase later on down the line because they're the ones who kind of took that chance on a smaller project. So coming back to your point around kind of reviewing the smaller projects, again, I think the whole ethos behind this is that, you know, anyone who kind of knows how crypto works knows that a lot of projects that eventually end up being talked about on Twitter and so-called shilled, they inevitably start off as a smaller project that no one really knew and no one really had any information on. So again, it comes back down to the idea we want to provide this information out there for the public. That's not to say that, you know, we provide any sort of rating or any sort of like, you know, buy signals or anything like that. It's just more around getting this information to people so they can make an informed choice, rather than potentially listen to what someone mentions on Twitter in terms of price movement and a cash tag, and then end up buying something.
Yeah, that's the harsh reality of it. Now, you just touched on it right there about mining, but we talked about this a few days back when we spoke for the first time, and we came to the conclusion that miners are the first people who find these gems, so to speak. So why do you think it is miners are always the first people to know about these new coins before they hit the market?
It's a very good point. So, I mean, in terms of the proof of work element of crypto, by its very nature, these things tend to be released on a first come, first served basis. So the idea being is that because proof of work coins have to be mined by a miner, it's, inevitably 99.9% of the time, the first people to jump on these coins when they come out are miners themselves. What you find is, even if there's an investor out there who's interested in the coin, and wants to buy it, he's kind of at the whim of the miner deciding to sell to him first, because the miner's the very first guy who has access to this. So a bit about my kind of story and how I used to find these coins quite early on, and how this has evolved over time. So initially, when I first started in crypto, the idea was that, everything was launched on Bitcoin Talk, and the process to filter out these coins would basically be that, they'd be launched on this forum every day or every week or every month. And as an individual, you just literally click through these coins one by one, and actually just read through them and see if it's worth mining. Over the last couple of years, that's thankfully evolved, and it's kind of getting a bit easier for the average person. But as that happens, you tend to find then now coins are launching a lot more obscurely than they used to do before, just to kind of keep this element of staying under the radar. So one of the things we've tried to do to develop that is kind of build something for our community to help people find these coins when they're initially first coming out. One of the methods that I've been using over the last couple of years is basically like an announcement bot, which is it's like a bot that scrapes all the listings off Bitcoin Talk when a project's announced, and it just filters through as in what you want. So the ethos behind that is, someone can quite quickly pull up a coin as soon as it's out, have a quick glance, and then maybe decide to make their move. Yeah, no, I was just going to say, the one thing I found that's evolved over the last year or so is that kind of a lot of people have cottoned onto that method. So now developers are becoming a bit more intelligent in the way they release their projects. And as such, people are becoming a bit clever in the way that they search for them. So one thing I identified with this to help our community, again, find these projects early on, is that I noticed a lot of developers are now launching their projects on GitHub before they even make an announcement on Bitcoin Talk.
Yeah.
And as such, anyone who's technical enough to navigate GitHub and search for the right criteria can quite easily find these coins very early on.
That's very true. That's a really good point, yeah. And do you think, in your opinion, do you think mining has become more user-friendly for new people?
100%. It's kind of ironic because someone who got into crypto around that 2012, 2013, 2014 period, pretty much they had to learn how to mine to some extent. Now, at the time, it was very difficult and very frustrating. It was mainly GPU mining at the time. So for the average user, it was quite difficult. I think the one thing I've noticed in the evolution of this whole industry in the last couple of years is that it has become a lot more user-friendly. I mean, now you mention it, I'm just thinking of examples over the last year or two. As it has become,
I was going to ask you, in what way has it become more user-friendly?
I just think for the amount of information that's available now is a lot more widespread than what it was. And I can give really small examples of this. It's things like podcasts, things like YouTube videos, the progression of kind of social media in crypto with Discord and Twitter and stuff like that. It seems to have just made it a lot easier for people to get the information that they need, but also if they're having problems, there's a lot of more resources that they can turn to.
There's lots of step-by-step guides now. Yeah,
there surely is. I mean, just touching on the point you mentioned, in a way, it has got easier. But then on the flip side of it, some coins have actually made it a lot more difficult for the average miner, solely for the reason, I guess, of kind of like keeping up that competition and making sure that, the people who mine the coin are technical enough to do it.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. And we had some questions from Twitter that people wanted to ask you. People wanted to know questions like, what's your favorite algorithm to mine? And have you ever been burned mining a scam coin?
Very good questions. And I would say, in terms of favorite algorithm, I'm mainly a GPU miner. So the one thing I always look for in terms of GPU mining is anything that's friendly on the cards and also energy efficient. Anyone who's listening out there who's either mined at home with a couple of rigs or mined in an office or a unit with a certain number of rigs will know what the summertime is like in crypto and how uncomfortable and awkward it can get when mining coins. When you've got more than one rig, so to speak. So anything that's kind of energy efficient and good on the cards, but also kind of cooler on the environment is something that wins for me. I'm just trying to think of the last couple of coins that I mined, and they were completely obscure algos. I mean, I'm thinking, yes, so Mimblewimble was the most recent one. So I was mining Grin and Beam. And without going too deep into Mimblewimble, anyone who's been around mining has kind of known about this for the last year or 2 years. And it seems to be a very, very interesting innovation.
Definitely, yeah.
So it's definitely one to keep an eye out for, I guess. I mean, Grin and Beam are the two big coins known on Mimblewimble. But inevitably, as it's crypto, more and more things will come out. And to your second question, which is very interesting, because again, this is one of the reasons we built Proof of Review, was just the number of scams in proof of work. Hand on heart, I think anyone who's been in crypto for a significant period of time will have been scammed in one part of the industry or another. And I think the word scam is very selective, and it can be basically defined into a lot of different things for different people. But I think in terms of the mining industry, this is the one with the most number of scams from pretty much top to bottom. So the example I can give in terms of being scammed is about 3 or 4 years ago, mining equipment, the way you ordered it, the way it worked was a lot different to what it is now, and consumers had a lot less rights. So pretty much the industry was built on the idea that a mining company would set up to build miners, and they would take a load of pre-sale orders, and that money from pre-sales would be used to then develop the mining equipment and sent out to their customers. Unfortunately, that way, kind of needless to say, that model never really worked.
Yeah.
Because inevitably, it's not too different from an ICO where a company gets funded before it's delivered any product. So there's very little incentive for those guys to work.
Definitely, yeah.
So that's one thing I've been burnt on in the past, is either mining equipment on a pre-order or buying mining equipment when it first comes out, and and then the value tends to plummet down the line. In terms of coins, I think everyone who's been a miner has been scammed on a coin, and I think it just kind of touches on the basic premise of Proof of Review. So the one thing that people will know who's mined any coin over the last 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years since crypto's kind of been developing is that with proof of work coins, it's very difficult sometimes for the developers to stay incentivized, or for him to have a good incentive from the very beginning, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I think one of the reasons behind it is because mining's so cutthroat, as we were mentioning before about jumping on coins early. I think people tend to kind of either skip the due diligence on mining coins, or because there's such a low threshold and barrier set for the information that we want from these developers, even though we might feel it's a scam, we just jump aboard anyway. And the one thing we realized with that about being miners is, although yes, you're not physically scammed out of any BTC because you've mined the coin, the underlying premise is that you've paid an electric bill that month for however long you've mined the coin for, but also you potentially lost out on earnings by not mining another coin. So cutting a long story short, yes, I've been scammed on many, many mining coins. I think
I'm sure you're not the only one.
But yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, now we've got proof of review out, although this won't prevent any scams, and I think this is one thing I'm really keen to stress about the reviews we put out. They're in no way any sort of endorsement of this of a coin that's been reviewed over any other. I think the one thing we do really try and promote for any projects that have been reviewed is just congratulate the developer and the team for being transparent enough to want to promote their project.
Definitely, yeah, definitely.
So I guess that's one thing we're trying to do with proof of review is just by the very nature of the developer and the team having to give a certain level of criteria to be reviewed independently, it hopefully kind of dissipates or gets, minimizes those projects that keep launching as potential scams with no real kind of desire to push forward with what they're actually promising to do.
No repercussions, yeah.
Exactly. And I think one final point on this, because I think this is really key to the project and the way we move forward with this, is not naming the names of any coins, but basically I tend to contact pretty much all mining coins that come out for launch. And the one feedback I kind of really built or kind of take on board when I'm contacting these guys is I appreciate the ones that, contact us and say, look, we don't want to do a review, and the reason is because we want to stay anonymous. I think that element I can really, really respect, because at the end of the day, everyone in crypto does have the right to remain anonymous, even if you're a project. But I appreciate the fact that they're honest enough to reply like that. The one thing I kind of tend to filter out is when the developer doesn't reply in any way or shape or form. Because then for me, that kind of sets off an alarm bell straight away.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you on that one. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, if this guy is more willing to talk about being listed on an exchange to his community than actually, doing some sort of independent verification of his project, then I guess internally people can register what direction that project maybe wants to go in, compared to say...
I mean, some of those accounts, I mean, their Twitter is very active, but then they're not, coming back to anybody who's messaging them, like you said, not contacting you back and whatever. That's a red flag for me, definitely.
It's true. And I guess one thing I want to mention while we're just talking about the project and the reviews is that we want to make sure that this is kind of fair and available to everyone. So, let's say there's a developer out there and he's interested in being reviewed. We are not here to slate his project. We are not here to criticize his project. If anything, we're actually here to help him, not only get the information about his project out to the public, but also maybe give him some advice and information from ourselves over stuff that we've built up in terms of building the reviews and seeing different levels of projects.
Yeah. Now this is something I just thought of. I really like the tiered system you guys use. So if you could explain to the listeners kind of how that works.
Yeah, of course. And thank you very much. I mean, in terms of the tier rating, when we initially kind of came up with the concept of proof of review, the initial review was just going to be based on the identity of the developer. Over time, as the project evolved and the concept evolved, we realized that, providing the ID for a developer doesn't really actually provide much information on the project apart from a name and a face of one member of a team. So over time, we wanted to develop that, and we wanted to basically build it into an overall review. So what we decided was we wanted to do a review on the team or a team member, a review on the fundamentals, and a basic review of the code, and kind of give that as one overall review.
So it's level one.
Pretty much. So now with the tier element of it, the tier element pretty much right now just covers the identity of the team and how much information they provide. So again, this is something we're looking to evolve over the course of this year now that the project is growing. And I think now you mentioned, that you like the idea of it. I agree. And I think one thing we wanted to identify with the tier is that someone can just pick up the review, see what level of, what tier rating they have, and then instantly make a premise about whether
because I find myself looking for tier 3 or level 3 before I read, like that's something I do. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, most of them are tier 3 or level 3.
That's correct. And just kind of breaking down on the tiers as they are right now. So they reflect that the level of verification of the team ID that a team member has done. So tier 1 is basically a basic verification of a team member. That will be his name, his country of residence, and the contact details for that person. We will internally verify them with the team member in place. With tier 2, very similar to tier 1, it's a very basic check. So we just do the same again and then just verify a bit more personal information around their social media, etc., just to verify it's them. With the tier 3, it's basically at the highest level of verification you can get for a review.
The highest level of transparency, so to speak.
Exactly. And with tier 3, what that involves is that the developer verifies his personal ID with our third-party provider, very similar to how you would KYC on an exchange right now.
Yeah.
And that basically just confirms the identity of a team member in question and sets that tier 3 rating. The one thing we've really liked with the tier 3 is that, as you mentioned earlier on, a lot of the projects we reviewed are a tier 3 rating.
Yeah.
What we're finding with this, it's like most things in life. If a few people tend to come out and do something and be transparent, then inevitably the people that follow that process will also want to, give the same level of information, transparency, etc.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, projects will strive to be level 3 verified by proof of review. Yeah.
Exactly. Now, I think one thing we've got in the pipeline to develop on later on this year, the more reviews we get on board, is actually amend this tier rating to give a bit more feel to it around the other elements of the project that we review. So I think what we'll do later on within the year, probably start from Q2 onwards, is to actually provide a rating on all elements of the review, which will be the code, which will be the fundamentals, and also
so you're planning on going much more in depth. Yeah,
pretty much. Yeah, I mean, I think the concept being then, if someone picks up the review, they can kind of see how strongly the project or the team perform on all 3 of those criteria, and quite quickly build a picture about the project.
I think that's really valuable, really, really valuable. And you said you plan to keep this free as well.
Yeah, we sure do. I mean, the main thing, what we're really keen to do in terms of building our project right now is to actually build our user base. We've kind of gone from concept to execution to now working with projects and getting reviews out. But the one thing we'd actually like more of right now is more and more people reading these reviews and getting involved with the actual, concept of like making this a standard in crypto for pretty much every project out there.
Yeah, so this leads into self-regulation that you and me spoke about recently. Do you want to go a little bit more into that? You think this is very important? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone who's kind of aware of the regulation and kind of landscape around crypto right now is always hearing news stories about regulators clamping down on this and clamping down on that, or exchanges wanting KYC and DEXs now turning into non-DEXs by requesting your information. So I think everyone's aware that the way the industry is going is towards a way of regulation. And I think the one thing that's always appealed to the majority of people who join crypto is always the sense of decentralization and being your own boss and managing your own funds. But on the flip side of that, we're all aware that this industry is very new and that individuals responsible for their money sometimes can make mistakes and bad things happen. So I think there's a fine line where people accept a level of self-regulation within the industry. So an example I can give is, an exchange is like a medium of self-regulation in the fact that a person wants to sell coins, another person wants to buy them. Because it's too difficult to be able to do person to person, that exchange is there as like a medium to basically self-regulate the trading element of crypto. Now, just kind of building on from that, I think self-regulation in terms of the user, I think is very important, because at the end of the day, we are the people who use crypto. We are the people who understand it. We are the ones who come across the problems. And I think it's really up to us to basically, put a level of self-regulation.
A standard, yes, definitely.
Yeah, as a standard, to basically make sure that, we reduce the number of scams in the industry by asking the right questions and, putting as much as we can in place to stop these happening, or giving, people enough information to know what they're looking for. Projects out there that basically, kind of provide content about things are great, because the more information and the more informed you can keep people, the better we are at self-regulating these things.
I couldn't agree more.
I mean, a really good example I can give of self-regulation that I feel that needs to happen in the space, and inevitably will, is the self-regulation of exchanges when they're listing projects. And I think we briefly touched on this the other day. It's inevitable that if exchanges are requesting the KYC information of their end user, the customer, the trader, they should be requesting that similar information of a project that's listing on their exchange to be traded. Now, right now, the business model of exchanges is to request a listing fee, and that listing fee basically guarantees a coin to be listed on the exchange.
It's not the correct way to be doing things, though.
I mean, I would put it solely like this: if it's in the interest of the exchange to get paid to list a project, how much due diligence has taken place over the idea?
That's a really good point. Yeah, that's a really good point.
And I think the one thing that really resonates with me in terms of exchanges regulating the listing of these projects is, at the end of the day, it's not them that get affected by, the developer running away on a coin. It's the end user, it's the miner who's mined the coin, it's the person who's bought it on their exchange, etc., etc. So although exchanges aren't fully to blame for that scam culture where, coins get listed because they've raised money, put it on exchange, and the developers then been able to dump it as pre-mine, etc., we tend to see it as like exchanges as like the medium for that to take place. Now, I would like to see, exchanges really starting to regulate on the coins that they list over consideration of listing fees alone.
Yeah.
And a really
we touched on this recently, yeah.
Yeah, and a really good example I can give of this is, actual exchanges wanting to potentially partner with someone like ProofOfReview to get an independent third-party review about a project as part of their listing. So, that gives one of two things. It kind of absolves the exchange of having to do this, and it's an independent review, so they've got no liability on the project that's been reviewed.
Because these things are time consuming, as you're touching on, and you guys would have this already done, so it would be a win-win for both.
Exactly. And then the other element of it would be is that the investor who comes on that exchange, when he's faced with a list of so many, everyone knows the experience. You go on an exchange and you're faced with a long list of projects, and all you see is the high, the low, the price, and the volume. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to actually click on one of these coins listed on the exchange and just be able to click on a review of the project?
You beat me to this. Yeah, I'm starting to imagine a place where you could go on an exchange, have all of your coins in, that you can exchange and whatnot, and next to the coin logo, for example, have a POR link to go straight to the review. So you've pretty much beat me to it there.
Exactly. And then, this touches on the one point that I really kind of want to push in terms of ProofOfReview, and it's how the people should be using it is, as someone who's been around in crypto for quite a while, I know that the process of buying coins and how it works, because I'm the guy, I've done it, and I make this mistake all the time. I'll see a project that I like one way or another, either someone's told me about it, either I've read about it or whatever. And my first instinct is to kind of find out about the price, where it's traded, and how quickly can I buy it and go from there. Now, inevitably, over the years, I've done this over and over again, where I've bought a coin because I've wanted a certain price, and then I've looked at the fundamentals of the project after I've invested my money into it.
Yeah, it's the reverse. It should be the reverse, yeah.
In the real world, most people, if they're going to invest any sort of, cash that they've earned or they've saved or, for an investment, the first thing they are likely to do is do some element of due diligence on the thing.
Well, I was thinking about this since we last spoke, and it's kind of like, if you put it in a more simple context, you don't go to a restaurant and order something random. You look at the menu first,
Exactly. And, that's a really good way of looking at it. Another analogy we can use is, if you're buying a house, you're going to at least look at the house and the area first before you actually buy it, and then move in for the first night and maybe find out, you've got horrible neighbors.
Absolutely. It's so strange that, it totally resonates with me, because I do this myself. I look at the price first before the fundamentals. It's so bizarre that we do things like that.
I guarantee 99% of the industry works like this. It's only probably the institutional investors or the more experienced investor or trader who does it the other way around.
Well, I guess
And I
it
think
comes back to, there's more consumers investing in crypto than institutions, I guess.
it's true. And I think it really touches on the point about not the lack of information that's available to people, because there's an infinite amount of information available in crypto now. It's more the concentration of this information and finding it in one or two sources that makes it easier for the end user, rather than I'll give an example. When someone maybe wants to get information about a proof of work coin, the process usually goes something like this. So they'll either Google the name of the coin, or they'll go on Bitcoin Talk and they'll pull up the ANN. They usually would try coin market cap first, but because a lot of these proof of work are so obscure, they have to try a different method. So let's say they pull up the ANN on Bitcoin Talk. Now what they're going to do is basically screen the first post of the ANN, get a limited amount of information, and then have to click on 5 or 10 links from the ANN to now build up a picture about, the coin supply, emissions, the price, the mining difficulty, where to mine it,
circulating supply, all of these things.
Exactly. Maybe jump on the Discord, go through a couple of channels to get all the information about the announcements, where they're up to with the roadmap, who's on the team, those kind of things. So this was my experience, and again, this kind of reflected in the reviews that we're delivering. All this information that you see in a review right now is the process that people go through to get this information, but they have to go through a lot of sources, and it takes a lot of effort to do it. We want to really reduce that effort as minimal as possible and just give it for people to read and say, right, there you go. It's easy enough for you to do.
I hadn't thought about exchanges using proof of review as a standard, putting them next to. I think that could be something that might work, If there's any exchanges listening, they should definitely consider something like that.
We would love to build a partnership like this. And I think it comes down to the idea of around the time Proof of Review was launched and kind of developed and kind of became live, I noticed that Binance research came out not too long after. So it really validates the concept that people would like this information about projects before they actually want to invest their funds. And
I think they need this information.
I 100% agree. They need this information. It isn't a choice, really. It should be a question of, let's say a review takes you 5, 10, 20 minutes, half an hour to read. Within that time, you could potentially save yourself a lot of, money by not investing in the wrong projects or something that doesn't fit your crowd. I mean, when I say the wrong projects, I don't want to put it like that.
Yeah.
Maybe it would help develop people's criteria and what they're looking for when they invest into a project. And a really good example I can give of this is, as we've developed reviews with Proof of Review and contacted teams and gone through the whole review process, the actual questions we're asking of these teams is kind of developing as well. And I'll give a simple example of this. When we first started doing the initial reviews, we would ask the team a lot of questions about the team and, the team members, the team experience, where they've worked before, give us a short pitch on each person about what their experience is, what they've done in work, any achievements that they've got. So that was like a natural progression of, rather than just asking, can you tell me who's on the team and what their name is and what they do?
Yeah, more organic,
Very organic. And then another thing that developed from that was, asking information about the team, where are you guys based? Have you got any physical offices? How often do you meet?
Yeah. Developer fund you mentioned when we spoke last,
Yeah, exactly. And then the really important questions that I don't see people asking a lot, or, if it is, it's on an individual basis. Things like, if there's a pre-mine and there's more than a couple of members on the team, who has access to the pre-mine? Is there any governance in place for how the pre-mine's spent? Is there any actual governance in place for the project itself and the project fund? How things move forward?
Yeah, like you said, important questions that people don't ask,
They don't. And, I'll give a really good example with the Canadian exchange that went down recently, the Quadriga. Unfortunately, I mean, from the reports that came out, it seems like the owner passed away.
Yeah. No, that hasn't been verified, I don't think, either.
It hasn't been. I mean, it's a good point. I mean, from the information that's been provided, it seems that the owner passed away, and he was the only one with access to all the wallets and all the all the backups, etc.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess at no point did any member of the general public ask that question: is there any governance in place for the management of the funds for the exchange?
Well,
Now,
I mean, accountability is a huge problem in crypto. It's a huge problem.
a huge problem, and it comes down to the basic premise of, like, we are human beings. We do make mistakes, and I think a really good example of making a mistake can be is that maybe someone doesn't make a mistake on purpose. Like, let's say the Quadriga X guy, CEX guy, he died. Now, he didn't want to do that, of course. I mean, I'm not kind of, trivializing it, but of course he didn't want to pass away. He didn't probably predict that he was going to pass away, because it may have been, I think it was a sudden illness called Crohn's disease or something like that.
Yeah.
But also, he never really probably factored that into the day-to-day running of his business to, appreciate, okay, if I die, there's no will in place, or there's nothing in place for people to carry on running this.
Yeah, it definitely begs the question, why weren't people inside the company asking questions about these things, having a backup plan if anything like that happened?
It's very true. And I think the other thing that people can now learn from this is, just touching on this point, is maybe we should, as the general community and this whole idea of self-regulation, maybe we should be asking the questions of these exchanges before putting any money on them, to basically see if they meet our due diligence criteria.
Definitely.
I mean, just one point on this. I mean, there's hundreds of thousands, if not hundreds of millions of dollars on exchanges in crypto right now. Now, the average user who's listening to this, I want you to ask the question: has there ever been a time where you've deposited coins onto an exchange, and before you've done that, you've actually Googled the details of the exchange to find out who the company is?
That's so true, yeah.
Who's the owner? What country are they registered in? If they go down and they got hacked, what police force and jurisdiction are they under? I mean,
Cryptopia is coming back, to the best of my knowledge. Now, how that hack will damage their name, we will have to wait and see. But usually exchanges don't come back from hacks like that. So it's nice to see Cryptopia coming back.
This is a very good point. And I think the thing with Cryptopia, to their credit, is that they have been very transparent in terms of their ownership, their owners.
They've been around for a long time too, yeah.
Exactly. And I mean, Proof of Review kind of touches on this in terms of the coins we review, because it just resonated with me what you said right at the start of the podcast about, that we look for smaller coins. And it's very inevitable that these smaller coins get listed on smaller exchanges. Now, alongside reviewing the coins that are being listed on these smaller exchanges, we would love to start working with exchanges to review them as well. Because, okay, we talk about exchanges and the level of scams that can happen. So Cryptopia is an example of, just a scam because someone broke into their infrastructure and stole the coins. It isn't an exit scam, so to speak. The one thing that anyone who's mined and anyone who's traded really smaller cap coins will know is that delving into the world of smaller exchanges does really, really leave you exposed and at risk of potentially.
Yeah, the risk is much higher, definitely.
Much, much higher. And the risk of the smaller exchanges is more likely the idea that, the developer or the project running that exchange is going to run off with the coins at some point.
And also some of these small coins on small exchanges, I mean, they're so new in development, they don't even have their own dedicated wallets. So you're forced to leave them stored on the exchange. Now, not a lot, but some.
Very, very good point. And I think one of the kind of blowouts of an exchange going down is inevitably the coins listed on there, that's their only market. That project pretty much dies as well, which is very unfortunate.
Yeah, that's very true. That is very true, yeah. I mean, Zero Currency was listed on Cryptopia, and when Cryptopia went down, the volume was hit quite a lot, which is unfortunate. But just before we finish up here, did you want to make a point there?
Yeah, no, I was just going to just touch on that one thing. Yeah, it can be very, very, very damaging to projects, the kind of impact of exchange hacks happening, and, kind of, yeah, you're right. Zero is a prime example. Cryptopia is a really good example of an exchange that did have a lot of smaller markets, and the kind of impact it's had on these has been profound. Now these projects have got to look for alternative exchanges to be listed.
Yeah.
They're now getting a lot of headache from their community, which is no fault of their own.
No fault of theirs, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Cryptopia was a well-respected exchange up until that point as well.
It sure was, and it still is. I mean, their transparency hasn't been the best, but at least they've been honest and open about it and what's going on, and they've actually managed to pull themselves back on their feet. So,
yeah, we'll be keeping a close eye on that one. But just before we finish up, I wanted to ask you one last thing. What does the future hold for Proof of Review? What can we expect?
Very good question. So when we first came out with the concept, the idea was just doing reviews for proof of work coins. I think now as we're growing with this, we really want to branch off into a few more avenues and see what else we can deliver. So our core tenet of any review is to be independent and factual as possible, but we also want to provide some value to that. So I think the first thing we want to develop with the reviews is the rating system that we touched on before, to cover all elements of the review as independently as possible. So I think what we'll do with that, we'll have a set list of objective criteria for each element that we review: the code, the fundamentals, the team. And as the project reviewed hits those criteria, we can give it a higher rating to basically reflect that. So that's one thing we want to develop on, is just the way we provide the reviews to the public and the information in there. See if we can give a bit more value by attaching, a rating to it. The second thing we want to do, and we touched on it briefly just then, is kind of develop our partnerships and start moving on into to reviewing other elements of the industry, not just mining related. So one thing we are going to start doing, or we are in the process of doing right now, is starting our pool reviews. For anyone who's not familiar with mining pools, how the mining process tends to work is a coin will come out, people will mine through a pool and have their share distributed by that pool. But in a nutshell, it's the pool that gets access to the coins before the miner. So one thing with that, it seems like pools could be an element of, vulnerability, and, people will testament to this as well, is that, pools tend to kind of...
Yeah, miners are going to love this.
They should do. And I mean, the idea being, when we proposed the idea of a pool review, there was a pool developer who contacted me to discuss that he wanted to get his pool reviewed. And I asked him why. And he said, I started my pool 2 weeks ago. This is the very first one I've done. And now I'm generating, or I'm holding, around about $20,000 to $30,000 worth of coins on my pool at any one time. Now, that was very honest of him, because what his concern was, he goes, no one knows who I am.
Yeah.
No one knows how skilled I am. If something happens to this, I don't want to be, kind of taken account. I don't want to be held to account for something bad happening without my details being public first. So it was very good of him.
That was very decent of him, yeah.
Yeah, he basically wanted to say, look, do a review for us, so at least I can build up my name, and also that way I feel a bit more comfortable about, the business that I'm running. I mean, if you think just on a kind of side note, at $30,000 revenue a day, in the first month of his business, he's nearly doing $1 million worth of revenue. That's $900,000 worth of revenue. And
nobody knows who he is, yeah. And that's the harsh reality of this.
It's true, and it's the first month of his business. No one knows who he is, and look at the revenue that he's generating. I mean, that's a lot of money.
Huge volume,
if you times that by the number of pools and coins that are being mined in the industry, I could quite easily say at any one time there's hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars being held on pools at any one time that no one is accountable for. So yeah, cutting a long story short, we really want to start doing the reviews for the pools. We're also now going to start building up our reviews that we're doing on other projects. So I'm going to start looking into branching out into doing reviews for tokens and that industry. And just touching on that note, I guess the one thing we're really looking to do now that the project's starting to develop and evolve is start developing our team as well. So I guess that just gives me the chance to mention that we are looking for new analysts to come on board the project all the time. The more and more reviews we do, the more and more people we are going to need on board for the team to be able to review these projects for us. So I guess just kind of a shout out to your listeners out there. If anyone is interested in maybe wanting to be an analyst in the industry, if this is something that interests you, If this is a skill that you want to build and have the opportunity to work with a company to do it, then by all means, hit us up on Twitter, get in touch on the Discord, send me a DM or an email if you're interested, and we can maybe discuss it a bit more in detail about what we're looking for, and also what skills anyone's looking for. And then I guess the last thing we're looking to do is, as we mentioned earlier, is just build partnerships. I mean, coming on podcasts and things like this is really one thing that we want to do is, make more people aware about about what we're doing, but also, make more people aware about the reviews. These are free for you to read, so it costs you nothing. These are basically, providing a lot of information for you about a project to the point of.
Well, you guys don't sponsor the show. We've barely even met since last week, and I can honestly say every time you guys put out an article, I go there myself just in case there's a project that's under the radar that I might want to invest in. So.
Thank you very much. It's very, very kind of you to say that. So yeah, I mean, again, we just want more and more exposure. I mean, inevitably with crypto, it's like this. And again, I hope this resonates with people. How many times does a coin have to start off small and no one knows about it and then pump, and you think, how did I not find out about that coin? How have I not heard about it?
Yeah.
And by the time everyone's then talking about it, we all know what happens, right? It's inevitably the peak of any cycle. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, in crypto, everyone knows that when no one's looking at something, that's the time you want to be looking at a project. When everyone's talking about it and it's the talk of Twitter and the talk of the town, that's the time you usually, if you're in it, you want to be exiting.
Exiting, absolutely. That was really good advice. Thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate you coming on. I'm personally very excited to see where Proof of Review is going. But before we finish up, do you want to let people know where they can find Proof of Review on Twitter and Discord and stuff like that?
Yeah, thank you. So our website is www.proofofreview.com. Please have a look on there, jump on reviews. Feel free to go through the reviews we've got. Any feedback we can get from the community on the review process, on the review information, is always much appreciated. Again, this information is for you guys, so we want to build it how you guys would like it. In terms of our Twitter, we are at ProofOfReview.com, or at ProofOfReview, sorry, and we also have a link for our Discord on there as well. Just a little thing before we finish off here, in terms of the review process, if anyone wants to contact us for review, just feel free to hit us up on Twitter, email, Discord, anything like that. We are offering a community vote for reviews right now, so we're doing one of these a week. So again, feel free to jump on our website and vote for the coin that you'd like to see. If there's a coin on there that isn't listed, but you'd like to see it reviewed, feel free to let us know and we can always add it onto the list.
Perfect. And thanks to all our listeners. We'll be back next week with a new episode.